So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here at the Assembly. I'm Keulemans from Amsterdam. It's my third time here. It's a great pleasure to participate in this forum. It's very good to see all of you here on a Saturday afternoon, and it's a special Saturday afternoon because of last night's news, of course. Now, before we go into our panel, I would like to ask one writer who is here to say something about Paris, because he spent part of his childhood in Paris. His father worked there. He goes there still very regularly, and he was he's a highly regarded writer in France, because they gave him the Légion d'honneur 2 years ago. So I would like to ask Mr. Viktor Erofeyev on stage to speak to us about Paris. And does this microphone work? No.
We speak Russian, yeah?
I speak in Russian.
Okay. Мне сказали говорить по-русски, я буду говорить по-русски. Здравствуйте.
They asked me to speak Russian, so I will speak Russian. So good afternoon to everyone. And of course, everyone is very sad in Paris. I was a week in Paris. I looked at the leaves of the trees of Paris, and I thought that the trees are strong, giving me health, power, freedom, because Paris is a free town. Paris, yesterday night, sang Marseillaise. Just the same way as during Nazi occupation, they did it because they have seen an adversary, an enemy, a common enemy, though people and news in this area must be taken in a very sensitive way, because otherwise we get fully confused in who is who. So I called Paris, of course, and my brother traveled yesterday before the terrorist attacks, so he left, so he is not in danger. And those people I know in Paris stayed calm. It is a French calmness, and it is a calmness of French who have taken the decision to face difficulties with dignity. And I think that we all should now keep a minute of silence to remember all those who died yesterday, all those who became victims of terror. And we should stand up to salute France and to wish France victory. Thank you. And if my Dutch colleague allows, we could now gradually start to work on defects and mistakes. When we realize that we called our panel, and panel is also a Russian word, and it means first of all prostitution. And how did it happen that we allowed all this, what is here? What did we neglect, and how did all this occur?
Thank you. No, it's fine. Thank you so much, Mr. Erofeyev. And may I now ask the two other guests for this panel. First, Oksana Zabuzhko. She's an equally fantastic novelist as Mr. Erofeyev. She lives in Kiev. She comes from Ukraine to Bratislava. Ms. Oksana Zabuzhko. And finally, Artemy Troitsky from Russia, who now lives in Tallinn in Estonia, and he will be joining us under your warm applause. Paris, and as you said, how these things happen will be inevitably part of the talk this afternoon. I think there will be inevitably part of the whole forum this weekend, because we are all dealing with the hatred, the aggression, the lies, the manipulation, which swirl around tragedies like these. That is why the forum this year is called Everyone is Lying. Tragedies like Paris immediately explode into messages from all sides, theories from all sides, manipulation from all sides, and lies from all sides. So when I am surrounded by lies like we are today, I would go look for truth. And I can think of no better people than the three of you to go search for the truth, to ask for the truth. All three of you are fearless writers, are brilliant writers, and are writers who are dedicated to speak the truth. So I would ask to begin with, before we head into other subjects, I would like to begin with asking all three of you, where do you go look for the truth? In the face of all these lies, where do you go look for the truth? Where is the truth that you can find? Oksana Zabuzhko, may I ask you first?
Well, that's the question, I think, which takes any writer the whole lifetime to answer. Speaking about the present-day situation, about this Russian-Ukrainian war lasting for 2 years, which have taught us in Ukraine a lot about how to tell false from reality, how to tell fake plots and fake scenarios from the natural ones. And I would say it's nothing but your inner sense of what is false and what is real. I don't dare to use the word true. I'm using the word real. And this inner sense is actually the biggest mystery of culture, because it is the principal instrument of any human being nowadays to survive, as 90% of this war, this third world war, let's call spade a spade now, plundering our civilization under the pretext of the local conflicts, separate and local conflicts or local crisis. So 90% of this world, third world war, is the war in your minds, is the attack on your minds, is the attempt to create a totally false perception of reality which would make you absolutely defenseless and unable to come to any sensible conclusions when it comes to your defending your interests. And that's precisely the realm of literature, and that's precisely the realm of language. So to answer your question directly and in most personal way, well, I usually look at not even at what people talk, though that's important, but at how they speak.
That's one, and earlier on you gave us a beautiful answer. You will go looking for your inner sense for what is true, and of course, this is a lifetime's work for all of us, including us here on stage. Artemy, Troitsky, where do you go look for the truth? Do you look for God, for Facebook, in music? Where do you look for truth?
I'm not religious and I don't have an account in Facebook, so first two guesses, no. Well, first of all, I think that the slogan that everyone's lying is not correct. If everyone is lying, it's the same as saying that everyone is speaking truth. No one is innocent, yes? In the words of Sex Pistols. So I think that although, well, of course there's plenty of lies surrounding us, most of these lies indeed are coming from governmental sources and from TV. But I think that still there are different gradations of these lies. And there are real champions. Yes, Dasha knows. And Dasha knows who is the champion. Dasha is Marta's dog, and the champion is Mr. Putin indeed. I mean, this person lies, you know, like we say in Russia, врет как дышит. He lies like he breathes. I mean, for him, this is not a moral crime. For him, lies is just a tool. It's just a tool, and this is the famous KGB school, and you can do nothing about it. So, indeed, when I'm looking for truth, I rather go to sources which, in my humble opinion, are more truthful than others. And if I find out that they also lie, then I just trust my intuition.
Where are these sources? Which sources are you talking about that are more truthful than others?
I mean the sources which are less interested in lying. You know, if we listen to what the government said, not necessarily in Russia, in other countries as well, the governments always have their own goals, they always have their agenda, then they also have their secret protocols and so on. So they are empowered to lie. Whereas there are independent sources, you know, which don't pursue any goals by telling lies, and I think
so.
That
today, if you hear the news about Paris, this is not just a catastrophe in itself. It's also a story about a lot of things that are going on in the world right now. Where do you go and look for as accurate an analysis as you can find?
Well, I think that there are some trustworthy sources in the Russian media, and I prefer to read those sources. I prefer them to some international sources, because
Examples?
Examples is Novaya Gazeta, Echo Moskvy, and some other oppositional sources in Russia. And if we talk about the terror attack in France, then I think that it's rather them who will be giving you some kind of objective, unbiased information than, say, what the French government says.
It's good to hear from a man like you who's been all over Russian media over the past decades, but last year chose to leave the country and to settle in Tallinn because the climate was simply not tolerable anymore for you.
Yes, and Estonia, of course, is a tropical country.
Yeah, it helps. Finally, Mr. Erofeyev, in the good old days, we could read Pravda, truth, but no longer so. Where do you go to search for the truth?
Мне кажется, что у каждого перед собой есть
In English. It seems like everybody has a miraculous mirror, and this mirror is composed of the values that reflect one's individuality, one's human national identity. Such a mirror can be seen, for example, in the work by Tolstoy, War and Peace. The Rostov family was a mirror where you could look and understand some things and explain them for yourselves, to what extent they are truthful and to what extent they are not. But since there are many such mirrors, there is not a single truth, and also there is truth, which is only truth of one class, truth of one group, and today it's truth of just one person, and we all know the name of that person. And in the light of this discussion, it's very pessimistic, because we are increasingly getting closer to the version of culture as a complex of individual and separate subcultures. It is increasingly more difficult to agree. I am not convinced that Putin is lying. I am sure that he himself considers his conscience to be pure. And when he looks in the mirror, he sees the values of KGB, he sees the values of communist ideals, and what he also sees is some mixture of Orthodox religion. So he is looking at the world through honest eyes, and he is convinced that in the east of Ukraine he is not fighting Ukraine, he is fighting the Americans. The Third World War has launched, has started, and we have to fight, we have to defend our values against the West. And what about the presence of Russian troops in Ukraine? He believes that truth has many faces, and that this lie is serving the purpose for saving the world from the Third War. He wants to transform this war into a local war. At least this is what he believes. I do not want to speak on his behalf, but I believe that today the time has come for Kremlin romanticists who take a different view of reality than 5 years ago. This Kremlin romanticism is based on their conviction that our people, our nation is best, it's better than anybody else. It's similar to the German doctrine of the 1930s, and this entire nation in this technology, which they consider to be truth, are ready to make many sacrifices. I attended the event, the Biden Forum. I must say that I have a green card in France, so I cannot say that I live in Russia. I only have indirect links to Russia. But there is, this is a tremendous conflict for one writer, the conflict that I'm going through. And the reason I decided to attend the event is that After I read a very good article written in the Netherlands, I wanted to write a book entitled Love in the Epoch of Putin. I traveled to attend the World Forum, and what I saw was a picture called Welcome Kremlin Romanticism. There were also other people quite active, among them also the opponents of Kremlin, and what they are saying is that we here, we are defending moral values, spiritual values, and you are people of interest, you have your interests, but so this is another lie. How can you transform or retranslate an absolute lie of just with blue eyes? I never had blue eyes, but they have gotten bluer. I believe that emotions are too high. It's difficult to understand what's going on in Russia. There is a regime that we all hate. This is understandable. Everybody sees that this is a bloody regime. It is a repugnant regime which is an impediment to the future of the country, but we'll speak about it later.
Speak about it. Already great.
A phone call from the Kremlin.
No, I think this is a story about mirrors, and there's so many different mirrors we're looking in. Let's continue talking, as you're both doing, about the lies and the truth that people believe in the course of this afternoon. But first I want to take a step back, because being writers here, this is what you do. You try to get the bigger perspective. Oksana, Zabuzhko, in your fantastic novel, The Museum of Abandoned Secrets, you go right to the heart of things. You say, you explain, you demonstrate throughout the whole novel how society can be mixed up, confused, and explosive because not all the voices that matter are being heard. Could you read this quote from the novel to explain what we mean?
Sure, with pleasure. Yeah, that's an inner thought of the protagonist who happens to be a TV anchor woman and who quits her job when she understands that something gets wrong with the media and some very untransparent monopolization of the TV channels in Ukraine has started. This war did not start with the annexation of Crimea. It started at least, I don't know, at the turn of the 90s and the years 2000, and in the information area. It's Russia that controls Ukrainian information, Ukrainian media. The same case, by the way, is in Bulgaria. So if you are within the body of the EU, it doesn't mean that you are protected from this kind of brain attack. Ukraine may be a case study with this regard, because despite of all these 15 years of demoralization via media, which has made one of the plots of this novel, well, somehow well, last winter, you know, we got awakened as a society and we were able to resist. So we can tell something, you know, while listening. Okay, maybe I'll dwell upon this later, because while listening to my Russian colleagues, I had so many questions to both of them, and probably as the representatives of the Russian literature, because
keep them
my
for
experience.
a bit
Okay,
later,
I'll save
because
them for
what
later
you're about
on.
to read is the start
Okay.
of the whole thing.
Okay. Our entire culture is built on faulty foundations. The history we are taught is nothing but the clamor, increasingly deafening and difficult to disentangle, of voices out yelling each other, I am, I am, I am. I so and so did this and that, and so on ad infinitum. But the voices resound over burnt out voids, over the silence of those who have been robbed of their chance to cry out, I am. Over those who had their mouths gagged, their throats slashed, their manuscripts burned. We don't know how to hear their silence. We live as if they never existed, but they did. And their silence, too, is the stuff of which our lives are made.
Their silence too, the silence of the people who have been robbed of their chance to cry out, their silence too is the stuff of which our lives are made. In your novel, you go into Ukrainian history, back to Second World War, from the perspective of the third, we have to say right now. You dig up, your protagonists dig up through oral sources, through archive sources, through memories, and try to patch life stories together, very often hindered by the authorities or hindered by the fact that a lot of people are no longer here. If I would ask you, who are the people today who are robbed of their voice, who are silenced today? Who would you mention?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many. You know, you mentioned, okay, World War II. In a way, now we are paying for the unlearned lessons of the World War II. We are paying for the decades of the silent collaboration of the West with the winner. The winner takes everything, as we know, yeah? And since Stalin was the winner, well, you can use juxtaposition, good Stalin, even if in provocative or playful way. You can't use a juxtaposition, good Hitler. You know, and when I incidentally, you know, 2 days ago, when I received the program and saw the title of our panel, and
Which is
felt
good Putin.
Which is good Putin, yeah. And okay, and the subject of the whole forum is lies, and I thought, well, could it have been possible, let's say back in 1939, to have the forum with, let's say, Polish and German anti-Nazi writers sitting together and discussing good Hitler, and then discovering then that it is the day of the bombardment of London. Sounds like totally unrealistic story.
This is an essential question. What does it say about us now here? Are we being naive? Are we being ironic? Are we being brave? What does it say about us?
Like civilization, you mean? like this whole civilization that has been living on silenced or half-silenced truths, on disguised truths, that have been lacking intellectual courage, intellectual honesty, and that have opted for the comfort, or to put it in the words of too many European politicians, I'm not going to give names, nomina sunt odiosa, but it's been precisely a year ago, August 2014, after the crash of the Boeing already, that I came to the Forum Alpbach, one of those, European summits where they mix politicians with intellectuals and writers to pretend that politicians might be interested, or that politics is still within the realm of intellectual activity, which is not. And I was sitting there, the warfare in eastern Donbass was already overt and open. Putin had to throw some real army, after having failed to ignite civil war, as he probably, well, not probably, but definitely was hoping from the very beginning. And here are all those nice ladies, very much Victorian type, very beneficial, speaking about how important it is to have peace and dialogue and mutually beneficial economic cooperation. So that's been the key word, mutually beneficial economic cooperation. So the answer to your question is yes, greediness, cowardice. I don't want to have anything. I don't want to hear anything about, any suffering somewhere there. It does not concern me. This will never happen to me. No, it will, and it does.
So it's greed, greed, cowardice, and
greed, cowardice,
lying to yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Self-deception. You cannot be deceived unless you agree to be deceived. And that's the strength of any, that's what makes, making KGB strong.
Exactly, willing self-deception.
Exactly.
Artemy Troitsky.
Surrendering to lies.
Do you recognize this? Because this is quite a picture that Oksana Zabuzhko is painting of a session like this. Is it again 1939? Are we German, Polish, Czech writers discussing good Hitler? Does this give you that feeling?
Well, it does give me that feeling, and this is why I'm quite infuriated by what my friend Viktor Erofeyev has said. I just wanted to say that all this romanticism, which, by the way, was also surrounded by, was a big thing in the Nazi Germany. I mean, the mysticism of the Nazi Germany, all those searches for Shambhala and the Holy Grail and so on, and the racist theory. It's all something that has happened during the Hitler times in Germany as well, and now we are talking about the new Russian Nazi romanticism, which, in my opinion, is not really happening, because before Putin has became a big romantic, he has stolen billions of whatever currency, and so first of all, he's a gangster and a thief. Then something went wrong. Well, and it went wrong because of his own wrongdoings. The Crimea, the Ukrainian war, and all this, he's been expelled from G8, he's been isolated from the global elite. Then, of course, there was the economic sanctions and the counter-sanctions, and then the economy of Russia became to go down the drain and so on. So he and his close circle, they've been simply pushed in the corner. They've been pushed in the corner with their голая задница, with their ass, with their bare ass.
Which makes them even more dangerous.
Which, of course, makes them dangerous, but then they had to perform what we call хорошая мина при дурной игре. They started, or like in La Fontaine's poems about green grapes. It was like, okay, so we have failed in foreign policy, we have failed in economy, we have failed in this and that, but we are the more spiritual nation of all. We are the best, and you are all poor kids comparing to us. Yes. So. First of all, this is absolutely hypocritical. I'm pretty sure, well, Putin is a madman. I think that he really is out of his mind. He's inadequate. Maybe there's a couple of other inadequate persons in his close circle, but all other, they're very pragmatic, and they understand that they lose money, that they lose their fortunes, that they can't use their yachts and their property in Côte d'Azur and so on. So they're quite unhappy. But they have to follow Putin in all those highly spiritual talks, which are absolutely hypocritical and which are worth nothing.
Okay.
It's just they want to disguise their own failure by these talks, and this is a very natural thing for Russia. Yes, we are poor, we are backwards, we are the worst of all, but we are the best of all at the same time, because we are the God's chosen nation. I mean, this is happening all the time, and it's no news for anyone.
Your language leaves no room for any ambivalence. As you recently said, it's a fascist, militarist, revanchist country right now. Now, Mr. Erofeyev, to return to you, because we're getting a quite dark picture here, obviously. You are unconsciously responsible for this strange title of the panel today. The panel's title is Good Putin, and you wrote this book, Good Stalin, a few years ago, and I have to say, I'm so curious who has read this book, Good Stalin. A number of people here have read it. It is, and you've read it? I must say, it's a very, very impressive book. It's a very honest book. It's a very moving book. It's about you, the son, and your father, who was a lifelong believer in Stalin, diplomat, translator, very close to the man, and believed in the system, in the Soviet system. But because of you, the rebellious young writer, he had to give up his position. And in later years, before he recently passed away, he told you, and he told the people on television, that you were way ahead of your time. But, Mr. Erofeyev, having said that about the book, do you see the legacy of Stalin in Putin's Russia today?
Тут, мне кажется,
It seems to me that it's a slightly simplified effort at dealing with the situation to say that Putin, just like Hitler, was a lunatic and that now he wants to build a new happy Russia. Those who thought so always lost during the millennium-long history of Russia. But still there is this position. Russia, in contrast to Western civilization, has a permanent idea that the person must serve the state. The Ukrainian conflict is mainly related to the fact that Ukrainians fortunately got rid of this colonialist pressure and started to ask the state to serve people instead. I have the same position. In Russia, with the help of the church, of patriarch, and of many strong instruments, people were always convinced that it is their task, their obligation to serve the state, and most people are ready to accept this. The population is, the power degrades, and liberals are afraid to admit it because there would be a question, whom should they liberate? It is this degraded nation is a very sick nation. When we in Berlin discuss this issue, nobody wants to listen because bad Putin, it's one thing. This is understandable, but the fact that people like to accept this propaganda, that they're happy with watching TV programs, that's another thing. People have become united in perceiving the reality. We can be appalled at this situation, as are some of my colleagues, but we have to recognize this sad reality. Those people who are at power are not only to blame. I believe that the Russian nation has the genetic fund that has become distorted because there are people are ready to believe what they see on TV, and they're even ready to travel to Donbass. 20% of listeners of liberal radio are ready to do so, and only 2% were against the annexation of Crimea. This is at the level of statistical error. Only 2% were against, but these are not false data. False data are elsewhere. If people say that my eyes have changed color, I believe that this shows that our liberal awareness is not honest, not sincere, that we are not ready to admit that political culture or political awareness for a Russian person doesn't mean anything. If you come to Siberia and ask somebody, what is your political culture? The person would look at you and ask, what? And I recently came to the conclusion that our nation is degenerating. These are not empty words. This is something that we have to live with and do something about. And the question, good Stalin or bad Stalin, that's one thing, but I believe that writers should be free. They should have the freedom to do something that the politicians cannot do. The writers could have the freedom to write about love to an 11-year-old girl,
Marquis de Sade in the past was not a big humanist either. Of course, Nazi romanticism and Kremlin romanticism have many points in common. This is no secret. They have the same myths, the same lies, but Hitler subjugated almost the entire Europe. For many in Germany, he was good Hitler. In the Netherlands in 1956, during an opinion survey, most people said Hitler was good. He was only surrounded by bad people. And it seems that we are getting to a liberal position. In my book, Stalin is described as good at different levels. 50% of current population of Russia believe that Stalin was good, and this proportion is increasing. Or the mention of my father. Stalin for my father was good, and today in many families and in many countries, father is good. Because he sends communist signals. This is a rather questionable issue, but I explained it in my book. When Sasha Bochenko translated the book, it was a very good translation, and he translated my book, and nobody thought that the translation of the title of my book would be incorrect. Although there are some people who said this is not a good title, not a correct title. By the way, Oscar Wilde said that the description of a book characterizes not the writer, but people who are mentioning it. So I am in a position of Oscar Wilde. I am not rejecting liberal ideas, but they are typical of the genes of Russia. Intelligence in Russia brought about the year 1917. Somebody wrote that it was the Russian literature that led to the revolution. I have in mind Chernyshevsky and Pisarev, but we were not able to find a solution. We keep blaming the power, only the power, but I want to ask the question, aren't the offenders in the world of crime romanticists? Of course they are. So here we have the overlapping between KGB and romanticism of prisoners. Even Putin is using their vocabulary. This is a very serious issue. It is not possible to simply say you're not right. How can you say so? I believe that our sickness is not 5 meters deep, that it is possible to root out the toxic plant by the name of Putin, but I believe this is not enough. The toxic roots go to the depth of 50 meters, and we have to be very diligent to change the situation, to stop them murdering our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. My favorite daughter is half Ukrainian, and therefore Ukraine for me is not an empty or a strange foreign land. Therefore, we have to lead a dialogue at the level of a very deep immersion in the theme. It is not sufficient to only lead a dialogue about who is good and who is bad.
Oksana, Zabuzhko, I saw you were impatiently listening. You want to add something to this story about the leader and the people?
Well, not exactly. I'm in a kind of a...
By the way, excuse me, could somebody give me a bottle of water?
Yeah, and yeah, and I join this request.
Go ahead.
Well, you know, I've just started to feel myself in a kind of a weird position here. I'm sitting now between two fighting Russians.
Our hope depends on you.
Following, following how this panel turns into this eternal Russian discussion how to save Russia. So if I may introduce here my outsider's view, because I'm not going to participate in that discussion.
You're almost painting it like the current situation between
I
Ukraine
don't
and
feel,
Russia.
I don't feel, I mean, this current situation, Chris, has been lasting for the past 300 years. You know, we have this very, very convolutedly intertwined modern period, and the problem with I saw on the agenda, you know, the discussion about the post-Soviet legacies or the legacy of the former Soviet countries or whatever. And this is also a lie in a way, the myth. You know, the whole term, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic is a lie, because it has never been a union. It has been initially disguised as a union. It has these units incorporated into the entity were never republics, you know, and they were never. There was never socialism. There was a state capitalism or state feudalism. You mentioned it, and this whole story, you know, this whole Soviet story.
So calling Ukraine a post-Soviet state is confirming a myth about the past.
I would cross this term out. You know, I really appreciate, I once heard this story from Vaira Vike Freiberg, the former president of Latvia. When she became, when she made it to the office, she was the first woman in Eastern Europe who did it, who got to that position. So she had been immediately attacked by the Western journalists, and all of them were speaking about Latvia as a post-Soviet country, and at a certain stage, after 3 or 4 interviews, she said, and you should know her, you know, she cuts quite a remarkable figure, you know, the woman of vigor and strength, so to speak. So she said, like, to the fourth one, I said, young man, go out and wash your mouth. We are not a post-Soviet country. We are countries that regained our independence. And we are unlike the Baltic states. Our story is much more complicated than that, because we are the countries that lost the independence war back in 1918, 1920. And it was after this Riga Treaty signed in 1921 that the restoration of the Russian Empire, disguised as the Soviet Union and under the smoke curtain of all these nice ideals of the world revolution and the liberation of humanity and Marxism-Leninism and blah, blah, blah started. But what is crucial, I'm gradually coming to the point, so I'm sorry, if you give me 2 minutes more, I write in long sentences, you know, with many digressions, what really shocked me last spring, in the months in March, when the annexation of Crimea was performed in this most, you know, arrogant way and actually very honest way. You know, it's just arrogance, it's chutzpah. It's chutzpah that nobody believes. Nobody believes that someone has an arrogance to troll you this way. And that's the trick. That's the whole trick. No, that's impossible, and everybody is laughing. So in these months of the annexation of Crimea, there was something happened which passed unnoticed for the West. namely on March the 16th. And we then have been following the news from Russia very closely, more closely than we wanted, because we had to. So on March the 16th, the Russian government has prolonged the term of secrecy for the documents of ЧК, НКВД, МГБ, KGB from 1918 till 1991. The term of secrecy has been prolonged, which means this is the same war which had never been interrupted. There are the same tricks that are in usage, and when coming, you know, to this passionate discussion, I think what is important, and here I would like to advertise the book of the author who is not present here, but who was also the guest of the forum in previous years, Peter Pomerantsev, who has recently published a wonderful book, probably the one and only as yet so far a textbook on the strategies of the current war, current Russian war, entitled Nothing is True and Everything is Possible. The book about, it came out from Faber and Faber last December, I think, and it's a must read. About
your point being?
So I want to quote Peter Pomerantsev. Thanks, I'm following myself. So I want to quote Peter Pomerantsev, who said about Putin something very important, not only in terms how to save Russia, but for the whole world, how to save ourselves. He said that Putin has been the most successful KGB officer ever because he managed to recruit the whole nation. And that's what they are now trying to do with the other nations as well. And here we come to the issue of collaboration, to the issue of recruiting the useful idiots by deception, by temptations, by, those who surrender to the lies, who are ready to be surrendered to the lies. So it is like cancer permeating Europe. And all these rightist parties, a century ago, back in the 20s, there were the leftist parties that were used as an instrument by ЧК and KVD politics to verb. Now, since now they change this, just the sign, from the left to the right, but now the same trick is being performed while using the rightist parties. And so on and so forth. And this story actually is the lesson which should be learned now from Russian-Ukrainian war. Yes, so this is the case study which deserves much more broad coverage than it does get in the Western media.
And you're one of the people helping us to do so. And I think all three of you are actually...
I'm trying to do my best, thank you.
All three of you are actually what we need, I think, today to look beyond the current situation and learn from history that there's longer narratives, longer histories going on here, and patterns that return. I think that is also why it's important to have you here with the book about your father and about Stalin, and about how Stalin became a father figure for so many people, and how so many people still believe that they could not survive without a Stalin figure at the head of the family or the gang or the company or whatever. Artemy Troitsky,
Oksana, Zabuzhko just gave us one example of something that Putin is very good in recruiting the whole nation. Now you, while you just shown us in very clear language what you dislike about the man and the leader and the symbol that he is, could you see, just like Mr. Erofeyev did in his book about Stalin, could you see something that could be regarded by you or others as good in Putin?
Well, I'll save time. I'll simply say no. I mean, when I'm usually asked, why do you hate Putin so much? I ask my question, why should I love him? And then people just keep silent because there's no achievements. I mean, recruiting the nation is, well, first of all, it's not yet a work fully done. He hasn't recruited me and many millions of other Russians. So I think that this is quite an effective line by Peter Mirantsov, but this is not true. But what is true is what Oksana said, that he really is now trying to spread his influence over Europe. And this is and this is an interesting thing.
What exactly are you talking about? How is he trying to influence Europe?
I'm talking about the fact that Europe is now really in a great crisis, and you know why, and what has happened in Paris is yet more proof of that. Indeed, Putin and Russia are trying to play with all those passions that are now happening in Europe. Of course,
for example,
America is way too far. But at the Sochi forum, the Valdai forum, where Viktor has been and was impressed by the romanticism of Putin, I've read the speeches made there. Putin's speech was absolutely unimpressive. But there was one very impressive speech, which came from некто именитый Václav Klaus, ex-president České republiky, který tam byl and who said exactly what probably Putin would like to formulate, but has not enough brains for that. He said that Europe is now suffering from different isms, like homosexualism, multiculturalism, globalism, and he gave several more words, and that all these isms, they are killing Europe, and that we only hope for Russia, who will help Europe to get rid of all those lethal diseases which burn down Europe. And this, of course, well, Václav Klaus is a right-wing guy, as well as Marine Le Pen and many other admirers of Putin
more of them every day,
in Central and Western Europe. And of course, you know, all those guys, they are simply very conservative. Their agenda is basically, let's go back to the 19th century. And with Russia that wants to go back to the 16th century or 15th century, to the times of Ivan the Terrible, of course, you know, they find an ally in Russia. You know, what's even more interesting and cynical is a guy from the UK named Geoffrey Corbyn, who is the leader of the Labour Party. Yes, Jeremy Corbyn, who's the leader of the Labour Party and who is like far left-wing politician, who is also all the time on Russia Today channel and who also says some nice things about Mr. Putin and understanding Russia and all those things. So there's
You're saying something very
an
good
interesting
about Putin.
alliance.
You're saying something very good about Putin, actually. So he's apparently capable of letting others speak for him. Even better than he can do it himself.
He simply occupies position that applies to lots of people who are very unhappy. With the Russian people, I fully understand why most of them are following Putin. It's because of several things. I'm sure that Viktor would tell you more about it because he's written the Encyclopedia of Russian Soul, so he knows all about the sickening features of the Russian mind and soul. But for me, the main reason why most Russians are following Putin is not even because they have all those frustrations about their fallen ex-superpower complexes, and not because of the imperial thought. This also counts, but this is not the main thing. The main thing is that Russians are absolutely hopeless. And when I say hopeless, I don't mean that they're hopeless, that they're totally stupid. I mean that Russians have no hope. Russians have no hope for better life. They know that they will always live badly, that they will always live in some kind of Schweinerei, and it will never change. And they have absolutely no tools, no chance, no nothing to change their life. Therefore, they kind of delegate their happiness to the government, to the big chief, to Mr. Putin and so on. So let us live in misery, they say, but let our big leader, Mr. Putin, and our country, scare shit of everyone.
Okay.
This is the main psychological thing about Russian people, and I fully agree with Viktor, who said about all this in the second part of his speech.
Yes, and he will say more about that in a minute, I hope. Oksana, you're grabbing the microphone because you want to add something to this, yeah? Because you're also an expert in the Russian soul, yeah?
No, I'm not.
No? Go ahead. You wanted to add something?
No. I just thought it's just very humble remark. I think it's been a very good description of one of the technologies how to recruit the nation and how to manipulate the nation. Because if you have the whole nation living with the sense of hopelessness, well, then it can be easily sent to kill to whatever part of the world, be it Ukraine or Syria or Latin America or wherever. Because at least dying with the arm in your hands
Will give you some kind of dignity.
Would give your miserable life some meaning.
Right.
And that's actually the very, Artemy said this again in a kind of a playful way, but actually it's terrible thing that that it has become possible. Yep. So it is then, the suicidal nation for which the ideal of death prevails the ideal of life. And there are other mechanisms as well, but okay. It is more than the remark, okay.
No, I love listening to you because just like in the book, whenever Oksana Zabuzhko starts a story, you don't know where it's going, but you know it's in safe hands. You always know it will end up in its place. But I mean that seriously. That is the great power of your novel.
But as a moderator, you have to interrupt me. Thank you.
I mean, but also because I'm so struck by these images of Russian as a nation without hope. Parts of Europe looking towards Russia, or at least towards Putin, to solve to liberate us of all these isms that are so dangerous to our society. On the other hand,
Excuse me, another important thing is Americanism.
yes,
Of course.
How could we forget?
Without America, there would be nothing.
So
It's another technology. Again, that's technology. These are the tricks.
there's so many dangers, but okay, so we could say certain people and certain leaders in Europe, also in this part of Europe, are looking towards Putin maybe for some glimpse of hope. But then, Mr. Erofeyev, in your book, you presented this image of Russia as a cow, as a hopeless creature, as a cow. I'll quote you. You said, "Present-day Russia is like a cow tied to a rope. The liberals are pushing her towards the Western market, but she's refusing to budge, in the belief that over there she'll lose her honor or perhaps even be eaten alive." So this is a kind of paradox. The Russian cow who is afraid of what could happen to her once she enters European pastures, and on the other hand, the sense that Russia and Putin might grow their influence in Europe.
Вообще, конечно, от политики очень сильно тошнит.
Od politiky vás nutka na zvracanie.
When you watch politics, you feel like vomiting. That is my feeling since my childhood. Since my childhood, I eat politics. My father was a politician. He was surrounded by great politicians, and all these lies from politicians is something I really wanted to get rid of. But Russia doesn't allow you to get free, and I envy my very good friend who was an astrophysician, and we visited the coldest area in the world, and here we talk about Putin and this guy Klaus. Why is all this necessary? Why do we need it? Why does a writer need it? We had here made a paradox of several things which are intertwined, and it's very difficult to disentangle them. It is very easy to find an external enemy, but it's difficult to find an internal enemy in you. In evangelic terms, you have the explanation that the real murderer, the real enemy is inside a man, and here we have an external enemy. I can immediately hate him out of my bottom of my heart, and that is the sense of life. We can have here banalities. I can repeat all the known things about the Soviet Union, Hitler, Germany. It's normal. It is a very easy situation. We have here an enemy, we shoot him, and that's done, and job is done. And the same you see in other countries, Catalonia and Spain, or Mexico and the US, and that is all this hatred which puts everything in mist, and it's very difficult to argue with it because it's nice and elegant, but I am free of all this hatred. I am a person living in a country which makes all of you here so excited. We have here an external murderer, that's Putin, and then we have this imperium of evil, and we can hate the leadership of this evil empire and spit on them, and because I stay nice and clean and beautiful, and that's all the enemy, and I try to get free of all these dependencies, and where I got into the S, because in Russia I am called a Russian asshole, and on the fifth channel of the Russian TV. I'm called an asshole, and on the other side, the liberals call me, you do something that's wrong. But I thought that probably I should be against things I don't like, against those views are maybe sometimes helpful to understand the situation. Yes, I went to Sochi, and when I appeared there, I knew immediately that all will curse me, and I think that the system of values generates different thoughts of hope and happiness than a Europe-centristic opinion, and the Russian people are, whether they want it or not, in confrontation with it. Their thoughts of death are far more interesting than the thoughts of death among the European nations. Therefore, we won the war because the Russian nation went to death, went to die without fear, in contrast to a German soldier who was much more in panic or had much more fear. The Russians simply know that they are replaceable. They know that once it will be Vasya, then Peter will follow. Everything has already been. And therefore, we were faster in Berlin than the Americans. Maybe here in Bratislava, it would be very difficult to outline something. Here in Bratislava, when I came, I was already promised imprisonment 2 times after this encyclopedia of the Russian soul. I don't remember now, there was a Russian nationalist, I don't know I don't remember his name, but what I want to say is that it's a book that should be published. And I don't know whether I will come to Bratislava or I will end in a prison, but in this case, I must say it's not a book of hatred against Russia. Therefore, I published it. It's a book full of love for Russia. Russia, which is somewhere in my bottom drawer in my room. So what I want to say, here, when we use these terms, we must understand that Russia is not a European country in the whole scope. It is European only in a small intellectual group, which is also not a stable group. We are dominated and Guy Zdanov named it very well. He said that in Russia, after these terrible stories of history, the moral we have is a moral that we have agreed on, and the moral changes depending on the episode. And so I, in fact, stopped to attend political discussions on TV, but once I had a discussion with Huguenot, and I want to tell you how to views can be confronted. Huguenot sits against me. He's a leader of the Russian communists. It's a story of last year. So he stands against me, in front of me, and he's so red, as a Swiss knife, and I tell him, you look well, and he says, I regularly get engaged in class struggle, and so we started to talk, and Zuganov
viac menej také celkom dôstojný moderátor bol.
Was a
Navrhnete,
distinguished moderator, and he asked, so what do you suggest? So the moderator asks him, what do you suggest? What shall we do with Ukraine? So he got red, Dugano, and says, we must send 2 divisions of volunteers. And he looks at me, what I will say, they both looked at me, and he knows, and now there was this audience applauding him, that's our people, and those, and Viktor Vladimir, what are you going to say? Why do we speak about neighbors?
Porozprávajme sa o nás.
Let's speak about us, about our country.
1,600,000
1,600,000 abortions a year.
Čo si s tým treba niečo robiť?
This is something that should be really dealt with. Yes,
V
correct.
našej krajine
They say, I say, in 20 years,
rokov opustilo
in last 20 years, 20 million people left our country, that is 4 times Finland.
správne hovorím.
Am I right? Yes. In our country, the average life in men is 64 years, which is the lowest in Europe. Am I right? Yes, you are right. And
Viete, koľko vyvezli kapitálu?
do you know how much capital leaves the country every month?
Miliardy a miliardy.
Billions and billions of dollars leave Russia.
A ako
Gennady, and
to vlastne možné?
how is it possible?
Prečo je tu toľko abortov?
Why do we have so many abortions?
Muži krátko žijú.
Why do men live so short?
On mi povedal
And he told me
len to,
only this,
divízie poslať. Obrátiť
we must send 2 divisions.
a hovorí,
He turned to me and says with his red face, you know, Viktor,
v našej krajine
in our country
je bordel.
we have a brothel.
To je skutočne ako
It is like a pact of oligarchs with a power party,
ako nešťastie.
and it's really a disaster. But Gennady Andreevich, why are you then
Tejto biedy
trying to get our neighbors to be involved in this misery? You want them to have the same problems, the same difficulties? And he looked at me
a úplne zakričal
and
strašne.
shouted, Viktor,
Ako keby som fínsky nôž
as if I were stabbing him with a Swiss knife.
a pochopil som,
And I understood
už je ruská duša.
that now
Kričala.
it was a scream out of a Russian soul.
Kievský človek, ja zoberiem všetko z Donbasu, ale z druhej strany
I take everything from Donbass, and
nechápavý pohľas,
and
pohľad, keď
and a view
o
lacking understanding when you speak about the problems in Russia. He was silent for a whole minute.
ďakujem za ruské otázky.
Thank you for the Russian questions.
Už som nemyslel, že niečo povieť po rusky.
I haven't thought that you will say something in Russian,
On
and I must say
trošku sa akože
that he somehow
a my musíme
sobered and said, and we must, and so on, and so on.
hovorí síce po Ukrajine, ale tak
He didn't speak about Ukraine anymore, but he repeated this
z hľadiska rozumie jasné, kto je to, aj ľudia v tých najvyšších
way where it is clear who we talk about, what it is about. Everybody must understand it. It is one of the images
súčasnej ruskej
of the current Russian policy when politics, when you see all these discrepancies,
to by sme potrebovali
and we would really need a week,
to zavreli a dal by som
and then we would be closed here for a week, and I could come with more examples for you to understand in a better way.
Okay, great. I mean, the novels are being created right here. This is a new novel right here. Listen, because all of you are raising all these tough questions, complicated questions, I'm sure you have questions. So now is the time to ask these 3 people whatever you would like to ask. Yeah, if you can share one microphone, yeah, it's fine. Mhm. Very good. So, feel free to ask. And preferably to one of the 3, that would be nice, yeah? And if you could stand up and give us your name, then everybody can follow.
Ivan Žabka.
Mhm.
Я хотел бы поставить на русском языке. Существует ли какой-то минимальный шанс в русском обществе,
Is there at least a minimum chance in Russian society to do something in order to reduce popularity of Putin, to reduce it by 80%? Is there such a possibility? And if so, what is it?
This question?
The two Russian gentlemen. Artemy, Troitsky, what's the solution to reduce Putin's popularity?
Давайте я тоже скажу по-русски. Во-первых, популярность Путина это не 89 уже, как сейчас.
Popularity of Putin is not 85 or 89%, but it's much smaller. In reality, only 10 to 15% of people genuinely support Putin, and approximately the same percentage hate Putin, and all the rest are indifferent. Of course, if you are asked by a sociologist who comes home to you, who calls you on the phone, you understand that the names of the respondents are well known. So the atmosphere in the country is no different from what it was, or maybe it's even worse than it was at the beginning of the 1980s. And just remember, in 1981, in Czechoslovakia, you had the so-called normalization, and just imagine that somebody comes and asks you a question concerning the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Brezhnev. What would you say? Or if they ask you what is your position on the brotherly help of the Soviet people to the Afghanistani people, everybody said, of course, it's a good thing. And maybe 1/10 of a percent of open dissidents would say something else. But today the situation is the same. This is why official popularity of Putin stands at 90%, and it's shocking that it's not put at 99.9%. So what to do in order to decrease it? There must be some transformations in the elite. I do not believe that the economy will be of any help, because in Russia, in the economy, there were times that were incomparable to anywhere else in Europe. There were times when the stores were empty. The situation was even worse than in Africa, but people continued to live. And this was the case of 1980s and maybe even 1990s. So the Russian person got used to this horrible economic situation. This means that the sanctions will not function. What will function is probably what many people in the Russian elite and even in the Putin's inner circle start feeling they are losing foreign investment. Their wives and children cannot travel and study in England or elsewhere, and this is what they deeply dislike. And so maybe there must be some inner putsch or something similar to the removal of Khrushchev or Gorbachev, and only then can begin something against Putin, because people can be manipulated. The Russian people can be manipulated, and I can assure you with confidence that they can be completely reprogrammed. And it is reprogramming the Russian TV and starting to broadcast the films showing how much Putin stole, how many people died because of Putin, how incompetent was, how they addressed this or that problem. This is not going to end up.
So the transformation of the elite, the education or the information of the people. I hope you'll allow us to continue to the next question, because I would like other people to have the opportunity to ask questions, of course. You already answered. Go ahead. You want to take it, yeah? Mm-hmm.
Путин омолаживается, он делает.
Putin is rejuvenated. He's having surgery after surgery. He looks very young, but his eyes are completely expressionless. But otherwise, he looks all right. But the time will come, and something will happen with him, and this will mean the same thing as it did in the case of Stalin. The situation is as follows. 75% of country leadership are people working for secret service. These people work in close interaction with Putin, and they certainly will not allow any putsch, any overthrow. It is a fact that the elite today is unsatisfied, especially the wives of the elite are unhappy, but this is not sufficient. In this climate of reprisals and authoritarianism, it is very difficult to do something. Let's look at the case of Kadyrov. Putin can simply say that my successor is not Medvedev but Kadyrov, and people say, but you cannot have a Muslim as a leader. And he says, why not? So to sit here and to think that now we are going to have a liberal putsch in a country where 75% of people are secret service connected, so it's not possible. Of course, it is no coincidence that the second person in power in the country is Medvedev. Maybe here some kind of a liberal spark could exist, but in the country with a crude dictatorship, no liberalism is possible. It is quite clear that not everybody adores Putin, and they do not kneel in front of him, but he is adored, for example, because of cutting off Crimea from Ukraine. This is why they love him for. But there are two possible scenarios. One is a positive scenario, like the
tricky. Other questions? Back there. And the microphone is coming your way.
Thank you, Valeria Karableva. I like the switch from Putin as a figure to really people. Mm-hmm. instead. But I would like to involve the Ukrainian people as well. That's why my question goes to пані Оксана Забужко. Дякую вам, пані Оксана, за ваші доречні інтервенції. I would like to ask, because I was intrigued with the subtitle of the panel about the balance between the European and Asian legacies in Central and Eastern Europe. So what's going on in Ukraine, in your opinion? And Adam Michnik once aptly noticed that the main obstacle for Polish people were Polish people themselves. Is it the case for Ukraine nowadays? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That would take another panel, probably. You know what I think? Well, I'll use your question, to make a remark which has been ripening in me while I was listening to my Russian colleagues.
So we're ready for another adventurous
for
answer.
Another,
yeah?
yes, for
Good.
another digression. But I think that's very important. That's very interesting. You know what they both were saying, and I noticed, like they both were using the word hatred. Either you love Putin or you hate Putin, or hatred toward Russia, or hatred toward yourself, or whatever. And I think this is actually the key word to understand this system that manufactures evil, this system of the induced madness. Because yes, it is via TV, via, I don't know, Russian Orthodox Church and everything. It is preaching of hatred, absolutely. I once tried to watch Russian TV. I can't. There is so much aggression. They all scream to begin with. They all scream at each other. And it is like, this atmosphere of terror. And it is precisely the industry that produces hatred. So coming to the Ukrainian standpoint, first of all, I don't hate Putin. I think who the hell is Putin that I waste my energy on hating him? Once you start hating, you are trapped. Once you look into the abyss looks back to you. And this is the emotional trap of recruiting nations, minds, intellectuals, and so on and so forth. This is such a waste of creative energy.
Are you saying
And
the
yes,
Ukrainian people are looking into the abyss too much?
There is no hatred in this war. If there were hatred, we would not have won the warfare in eastern Donbass. Victor has mentioned Berlin. Probably you know very little about Debaltsevo. In Debaltsevo, in January, they were using the same technology. They were sending detachment after detachment. I mean, Zyuganov is naive like a baby. There were 2 divisions of whatever, I don't know, and according to some figures, there were like over 10,000 bodies of Russian warriors, of Russian soldiers under Debaltsevo only. Ukrainian losses in this whole war are, up to 8,000 in 2 years, And this 8,000 would never allow me not to speak of the families where the people are wounded, not to speak that every Ukrainian has a friend or a relative who is or has been serving the term in the army, and these are alive stories. This is flesh and blood. while we are sitting here, a very talented young writer, Artemy, is now serving down there in eastern Donbass, and we've been all, volunteering, crowdfunding for his detachment to buy this thermovision device because he said Russians are there, right in the grove. And it is because of this, because the whole country has been living with this. This is not a hatred. You can't fight with the hatred. Anger is a different feeling. Right. Anger can be divine, even in the Bible. Anger can be noble. Hatred, no. Hatred, no. Hatred is evil by definition. And once you start experiencing hatred, rather than anger and the desire just to clean your mind, your land, your country, your culture, whatever, of this cancer, of this virus of hatred that crawls in and then starts to rule, because it is a virus. And that's it. And I think that's what helps, coming back to your initial question, that's this instrument, right, which helps you to see what's false and what's true.
Right.
I don't know whether I've answered your question.
I think, yeah, it was good anyway, and I think you were speaking about what you're seeing around you in Kiev and
that's
Ukraine.
Not just in Kiev. I've been traveling
all across the country.
I cannot. I cannot side with Viktor's sighing. I understand this very well. Oh my God, why should I grab, in this shit, and I've had enough of that, and so on and so forth, and I would love to go to Ireland. I cannot go to Ireland because I have my country, I have my society, I have my readership, I have people, who want me, and for the whole year I haven't written a line apart from, some articles, essays, or whatever, but I've been traveling all around, I've been talking to people, I've been and reading them, poems, whatever, and just talking and answering their questions, and it's been like, I don't know, some kind of word therapy or something like this. I've never felt so demanded as a writer in my life, not in the quality that I would like to be demanded, but it is also a part of a writer's job in that situation, and you do feel engaged. Yep. And that's bring us back to the issue of the engagement of a writer and intellectual. And that brings us back to Paris and to France and to the responsibility of literature for what is going on nowadays.
And of what drives you as a writer to give voice to the people who are silenced. I think so.
Kind of.
We have space for one more question, but I see several hands, so it's up to our man with a microphone to make his choice. There's one here, there's one here. Okay, let's do two questions, yeah? So the lady in the middle and then gentleman up front here.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Марыля. У меня вопрос, или скорее такой комментарий к господину Еврофееву. Вот вы в начале дискуссии сказали, что происходит вырождение.
At the beginning you've said that we have a degeneration of the Russian people, what we see, and I was really surprised to hear it. Could you really elaborate on this idea? We speak about an intellectual degeneration, or that people are not thinking about moral issues because it makes no sense.
Again, we could spend another forum on this one.
I will ask you to keep it short in order just for us to finalize this session on time.
Ну, давайте поужинаем, я вам все расскажу.
Let's have a dinner, and then I will explain everything to you. I mean degeneration. I will explain to you degeneration. But you are right.
obrovská otázka.
It's a vast question, and to speak about the generation of the population with which you have mercy, it's really very difficult.
Pozrite sa, genocída
But genocide
prebieha už celé stáročia.
is something that is going on for centuries, and after 1917,
Tých najlepších.
the best were murdered, the best were killed,
Tak to
and
samozrejme zo všetkých vrstiev obyvateľstva
this comes from all strata of society, including workers, farmers, and we had the same during the World War. In the war, it was not the worst who died or were killed. So the result is that we see huge changes, and we even don't mention the word vodka that they like to drink,
vznikajú ďalšie momenty s
which would produce new moments which are really a disease,
drogami
alcoholism, drug addiction,
veľa ďalšie.
and many other things.
Skutočne situácia už blíži.
I think the situation comes close to
Nepríjemnému
a very unpleasant end.
vidíme
And
počujeme, že
even today we hear and see
systém
that
zmenej osvety
if we could build a system of TV awareness raising and teaching in place of this awful propaganda we have, if we could build a system which I worked on, but the TV was forbidden 4 years ago, that in that case something could move forward.
slov o nenávisti.
And a few words on hatred.
Nenávisť je
Hatred is
ku slov s iným význakom.
is in every language a word having different
To vôbec
meaning.
ruskou nenávisťou.
The English I hate has nothing to do with the Russian hatred. It's only an expressive term.
Rusko je také ťažšie
But in Russian, it's a heavier word.
definuje
It defines
nepriateľovi,
a
nepriateľom.
attitude to enemies,
S tým prešli celú
and we have survived on this the whole Second World War
Nemcom.
based on the hatred against the Germans, and we won due to this. I don't know whether we could win without hatred, but the victory
Množstvom
cost a lot of casualties, but we have achieved it.
rozdiely
And so there are some differences in the concepts, and they produce phantoms and mirage, and yes,
prvou manželka bola Poľka a
my wife was Polish,
Rusov
and they really hated Russians,
okupantov.
because they were those who occupied the people, they were those who murdered,
Rozprávam po rusky a hlavne kompliment.
and therefore I speak Russian, and my compliment
Prešli cez
when we
hranice, tak
crossed the border, my wife says, end of Russian, we start to speak Polish.
keď
And when we were in the Tatra mountains and we skied, the best compliment I could ever earn was,
ako ste nepodobní Rusom.
you don't look like Russians. That was really a gift.
A bolo úplne jasné, že
And it was absolutely clear
to bola tá neláska k systému.
that this you don't look like Russians was this expression of dislike of the system, and Soviet Union is of course history, but now we are through it.
Nikto v skutočnosti neverí a
Nobody today believes and thinks that in Russia we had socialism. Nothing was just neither Lenin. Everybody knows this
aj liberálne
a long time. Everybody explained it, including liberal public.
štierky.
And what we have here is only
Teraz už je
small pieces of it.
národná myšlienka.
But now we have this
Poliaci,
national thought here and there, and the Polish won. And the Ukrainians have also a chance, if they stay so firm, they might maintain their position. Europe is not supporting them a lot, but we, with you, will have far more problems because we will have to get tough and rise from dust and to build something out of it, only for one reason, and that is that we have really a surprising culture. With Artemy, I can quarrel here, argue with him, but he's a very civilized cultural person, and I appreciate him therefore.
Very true, very true. And the rest will follow over dinner, yeah?
This is only the beginning of the story about the degeneration of the Russian people. Final question for you, sir. Here, so where's the microphone? Up here. And please, because the next session is supposed to start at 6:15, short question, short answer.
Okay, so I had three, but I will choose the shortest one. My name is Fedor Blaschak, and the shortest question I have quite mixed feelings for the recent 2 years. So my question to you is maybe you will help to resolve the problem for me. Are we at war?
Are we at war? May I ask that question to Oksana? Or shall we ask all three? Shall we ask all three? Are we at war? Is it 1939 or is it 1940? Artemy Troitsky.
I don't think so. I don't think we are at war. Well, some people are at war, of course. But say if we are in Slovakia, I don't think that Slovakia is at war with anybody. Russia is constantly at war with itself. Generally speaking, well, Oksana was talking about World War III, which is disguised as local conflicts, but in reality it's World War III. In my humble opinion, this is not so.
Okay, shall we keep it at that? Because this is, again, such a huge question. May I ask you to answer the same question, Mr. Erofeyev?
Серьезно ответить или так, прикинуться?
If it's answer only just so a serious answer, then the answer is yes. If you really want to speak seriously about it, so we really fight. But there is a small chance to stop a global war. There is such a chance, and like Stalin said, let's fight to keep peace, but let us use different means.
Not like Stalin.
Terrible quote, terrible quote. Yeah. Finally, Oksana, you already gave the answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, my answer would be the same. I would just expose it a little bit. How did you know? I think we have been at war. For the whole past century, 1914, until now, it has been a war which had been surfacing at certain periods and dispersing. Well, in some minor wars or something, there has been this Cold War, and then there has been 1989, 1991, which the West took as the victory of the West, and right now, from the prospect of the past 25 years, it looks like, again, it's been a big fraud of the KGB that was quite eager, to get rid of this smoke curtain of communism, to keep the structure of power and to build a new empire, which now is a synthesis of Lubyanka and Hollywood. And that's why it is so easy to be recognized or spotted, or to be taken for what it is. And that's the war, that's the neo-Orwellian society of the 21st century. And I've been watching very closely, any signs of hope, whether it can be stopped, whether it can be prevented. Theoretically, yes, if people change their minds and their way of thinking. But I don't think much hope for that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, I could have given much more optimistic an answer, but we are speaking about truth, so I've chosen to be honest.
Thank you so much. Final words.
Today we have cleaned all the shoes of Russia, and we haven't said anything about Europe. The last half year I lived in Berlin and traveled a lot in Europe, and I must say that the situation looks very triste, very sad. Europe is very weak in all aspects. Why do I tell it to you? Because you live in Europe, and when we speak about shortcomings of Russia, everybody welcomes it and says, write to New York Times right there and there. But there are also other issues which concern the purpose of life in Europe. Europe forgets to think about itself. Europe thinks in space, in areas, but not about itself. And we prefer to speak more about Russia and Ukraine, but maybe we should start also to think about Europe. Probably Europe is not so sick, not so stupid yet, but it seems like as a piece would fall away, and you need to fix it and to oil it so that it functions
we really
as
have
it
to
should.
cut it off here. And by the way, we're going to talk about Europe all weekend long. Yeah? So that's the purpose of this whole forum. Now listen, I want to thank all three of you, but first I want to thank our brave and great translators. Yeah? Shall we give them a round of applause? And they will be talking to us about Europe also all weekend, I'm sure. Now, we started with a sort of a funny, ironic title, Good Putin. Very quickly, Oksana, you put us straight and serious, and you said this is 1939, people, and let's not kid around. Because then we started talking about lies, about hypocrisy, about hatred, about degeneration, about the isms that some people think are threatening us, and about the hopelessness. And I think it was good. I think it was razor sharp. I think it was very honest. And I think we had no other choice to talk like this on a day like this after what happened in Paris. So
we should also say thank you,
sure.
dear sir, from even Holland, but Amsterdam, and such terrible things. Could you imagine it works very, very well? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Artemy, Troitsky, Oksana, Zabuzhko, Viktor, Erofeyev.
Finally, I want to say Svobodu Petru Pavlenskому. Petr Pavlensky is Russian actionist performer who has burned the doors of the KGB building a few days ago, and now he's under arrest. So, freedom to the prisoners of conscience.